I recorded this about 4 times. You know what it is, don't you? It's the Astartes of a new series. Come on, let's do this. Hey everyone, welcome back to another Forge of Soulless Paints. I'm Wayne, nice to have you here. Well, first thing I want to say is thank you to all of the new subscribers I've got. Thank you for interacting with my content up on Instagram, Reddit, here on YouTube, and all of the other places I've been posting. I'm seriously humbled at the amount of feedback I've had at my recent painting. Well, this is a little bit different to what I had scheduled. I started painting my Dark Angels army. Now this is the thing that really is the project that I've wanted to get to for the past couple of years. What I'm going to do is I'm painting my entire company of Dark Angels in my own theme. You might have seen the pictures that I've been posting up on Instagram, and they have had a lot of interaction, like I said. So what I thought I would do is, rather than just answering individual comments, it seems like there's been quite a thirst for finding out how I painted the green armour and how I painted the robes. I am using an airbrush for the most part. You can achieve this look with a brush, glazing. I have done it on one of my test minis. It took me a long time, and I won't be doing that for an entire company of 100 odd Marines. That said, let's have a look at that green armour. And let's get to the painting desk and find out how I did it. I'll see you there. Okay guys, so let's get into this. The first thing I've done is I've undercoated the entire miniature in black, and then straight on I've hit it with a grey, and then a top-down zenithal highlight just with a white. Use whatever primers you're comfortable with for this, it doesn't matter. Your airbrush if you want, whatever a rattle can. Next thing, we're going to hit it from a 45-degree top-down angle with some Vallejo black green. So, just hitting it, like I say, from top down, so we're keeping that black undercoat in the extreme shadows, and that's what we want to get this really nice contrasty look. Just be sure to give it a little bit of air between each coat and go nice and thin. You don't want to get to full opacity, you want to keep that underpainting that you've done with the zenithal highlight and the mid-tone of the grey. So, thin, even coats, from a distance of about 15 to 20 centimetres. And I've got my compressor set to about 20 psi, so I've got a nice spritzing thin coat. So for the first highlight, we're going to use Vallejo Gunship Green. I've reduced my compressor down to about 15 psi for this, just so it's not quite as aggressive. So what we want to be doing is hitting the highlights on the model just where we think the light had hit. So any parts of the model that are sticking out at the top edges of it, so the pauldrons, what I like to do is I think in volumes rather than in flat surfaces. So looking at the shoulder pads for instance, we can see that the top part would get more light than the part around the side. So let's hit that. Also, it's worth paying attention to where parts of the model fall into shadow. So naturally on this model, for example, the shield guard, the leg on the left hand side is going to be natural shadow, so we wouldn't hit as many highlights on there. We'd still hit a little bit, maybe on the top of the knee pad and such, but nowhere near as much as on the other leg. So just pay attention to things like that. Have a good look around your model maybe before you start spraying and go from there. Again, nice thin coats, dry it with a little bit of air between each one, and just go with whatever you think. You know, if you want to get it a little bit lighter, put another coat on. If you want it a little bit darker, leave it. Whatever you do, just go thin, go slow, and let that base coat show through. One good tip for this as well is, as you're working with the airbrush, it's often really good to warm up before you start going straight into a miniature, especially if you're not overly familiar with your airbrush. What I tend to do is just run through some drills on a piece of paper. So, you know, it just swirls, writing my signature, and trying to get different widths of line, but consistently different widths of line with the airbrush. Work on the angle that you're holding it and the distance you're going from the paper or the model. And straight onto the second highlight, Vallejo Duck Egg Green. So this looks like a really bright colour and it's going to make the model look really bright, but don't worry, in the next stage we completely knock it back. What you'll notice as well is I'm getting the airbrush much closer to the model, but then I'm moving it away quite fast. This is used in conjunction with the dual action trigger, so it gets much creamier blends if you do it like that. Again, it comes down to practice, so give it some time and go. Remember we talked about volumes earlier? Well, this is one of the times where that's really important. So again, using the pauldrons as the example, as the round part sticks out a little bit more, hit that with a little bit more colour and then pull the brush away so it's fading out, gives you that nice feathery look and gives you that creamy blend. Also, things like the helmet where the bottom of the eye socket protrudes a little bit, let's hit that with a little bit of colour. Even though we're going to be overpainting it later with the eye and the glow, it's really good to have that as an undercoat and a base tone to that so it ties everything together. So go slow, go thin, don't forget, get some air on there and dry in between. And just be really careful, just the extreme edges is all you want now, so almost 90 degrees top down. It's much easier to add more paint than take it away, so if you need another layer, do it. So we're done with the airbrush now. What we're going to do is wash it back. So we get some Citadel Lamium Medium. I put a good blobge of that on my palette, and then some Colia Green Shade. And it wants to be about a 2-to-1 mix, medium to Colia Green Shade. You can't actually see the medium that well on the palette there, but I assure you it is there. So give it a good mix. And once you're happy with it, that it's nice and thin, that's the key here, because this is a really strong colour. You apply it all over the model. I tend to work in small patches. What this does is it stops it pooling, and the idea of doing it so thin, we're actually going to give it 2 coats of this, is to stop any sort of brush marks appearing, and it gives it that really rich emerald colour, and this is where the model really starts to pop. So work in small sections, but obviously you're working with the wash almost at a glaze consistency with this, but because it's still quite strong, we do need to work nice and fast. Even though it's thinner, we don't want those brush marks, so get it on, get it fast, not too much pooling, and yeah, all over the model, everywhere you want it, even on the black parts, and it really brings those colours together. So even if you've not got fantastic blends with your airbrush, this will help, and it'll give a really nice matte finish to the model. You can always gloss it later. So just working methodically, working your way around, and having a good look, you should be good. Let it dry completely, put it to one side. If you're working on a couple of models, you can see in the frame here, I've got a few more on there. I let them dry totally, and then I came back and gave it a second coat. So I'd left it overnight to completely dry it and came back in with a second coat. Exactly the same thing, 2-to-1 mix of Lamium Medium and Colia Green Shade. And we're doing exactly the same thing, exactly the same technique as the previous one. If you're working in sub-assemblies, it makes it a little bit easier. Recommend you do that, but so long as you hit the entire model, so you've got all the same tone going through it, you'll be fine. Take your time, enjoy the process, work on a couple of models at the same time. Just give it at least half an hour to dry. And for the final stage, we're jumping back to Vallejo Duck Egg Green, and what we're going to do is some selective hedge highlighting just on the sharpest points here. Yes, that is a different model to the Blade Guard Captain. I may have lost the footage, whoops, so we're just going to have to use this one instead. Technique's exactly the same, we're just going to hit the highest points where the light had hit. So, as you normally would with an edge highlight, I use quite a fine brush, thin paint, and I just run the side of my brush along the sharpest points of the armour, where it's not an edge, but for instance on the backpack, on the top of that, just brace your hands together, get a nice good platform, and then paint a nice thin line, and we're done. Okay, and there you have it. It's not that many steps involved. Yes, I'm using an airbrush. If you don't have one, like I say, you can do it with glazing. I wouldn't recommend it for a large number of troops. So how do you paint your Dark Angels? I'm really interested to know how other fans paint theirs. It's not the standard look that I've gone for, and granted, it's not going to be a standard company. If there is some interest in how I'm doing my company layout, what the lore is, and how that fits into the overall narrative with both the Games Workshop canon and my own head canon, let me know down in the comments, and I'll put a video together documenting everything there. That said, how do you find this? Was it good? Was it bad? Give me some feedback. If you did get some use out of it, please do give me a thumbs up. If you're not already, do subscribe. If you know somebody that might like this video, give it a share, will you? If you didn't know, I also co-present a podcast every second Monday. You can find out more about that over at thedroppod.info. Let me know if there's anything else that you want me to cover. In the meantime, if you want to see what I'm up to, what might be coming next, give me a follow on Instagram, same name, Forge of Solos. And without further ado, the only thing that's left to be said